What actually become to the Storage Wars stars? The people we cheered for, laughed with, and witnessed win big or lose big? Some well-known faces have disappeared from the television over time, leaving viewers to question whether a tragic event occurred. Were there unintended consequences? Or did they just turn their backs on attention? The fact is equally shocking as the rumors, but it's not as dire. Weiss, Barry. Barry Weiss was more than simply a Storage Wars cast member. The show was centered around him. Viewers knew they were watching someone exceptional from the moment he drove up to his first auction in one of his classic cars, sporting those trademark gloves and grinning mischievously. Barry was never the most aggressive contender or the loudest bidder. Rather, he offered genuine enthusiasm, which the show sorely needed. Barry viewed each storage locker as a treasure trove ready to unlock its mysteries, while the other cast members concentrated on profit margins and business tactics. When he opened a unit, he saw more than just dollar signs, he saw adventure, history, and stories. Instead of figuring out the jukebox's market worth, he would spend more time discussing the music it used to play. His eyes would light up like a child on Christmas morning when he found vintage trinkets. Barry realized that sometimes what you could sell wasn't the true treasure. At times, it was the thrill of discovering something new. He took a refreshingly new approach to the show. Long before storage battles, Barry had already made a fortune in the food industry. For him, the purpose of the auctions was to have fun, not to survive. This flexibility enabled him to bid on units that appeared worthless, take chances that others would not dare, and pass up certain things simply because they didn't pique his interest. This aspect of him appealed to viewers since it brought back the excitement of discovery that initially drew them to the show. Even the most uninteresting discoveries were made amusing by Barry's charm. He could make a dusty piece of furniture into a lesson about craftsmanship from decades ago, or he might turn a box of old books into an intriguing conversation about forgotten authors. He also knew more than the bare minimum. Barry had a true understanding of rarities, antiques, and their histories. He treated each discovery with the respect it merited, showing reverence for the objects he uncovered. However, Barry quietly left the show after just 4 seasons. There was no dramatic departure or contentious dispute with the producers. Like someone finishing a treasured book and carefully putting it back on the shelf, he just made the decision that it was time to end that chapter of his life. Although unhappy, the majority of fans understood. Barry had never come across as someone in need of attention. He was merely a person who liked to tell people about his exploits. Following his departure from storage warfare, Barry had a low profile for years. He went back to his other interests, searching antiques, collecting vintage automobiles, and partaking in adventures that didn't include media crews or cameras. With the same kind grin and contagious energy that made him famous, he would occasionally appear in interviews for guest appearances. Before things changed in February 2019, Barry Weiss's life appeared to be going well. Barry was in a terrible collision while he was riding his favorite motorcycle around the streets of Los Angeles. He suffered several shattered bones, extensive internal damage, and serious injuries to his legs and chest as a result of the severe accident. All of a sudden, the man who had always exuded confidence and could enter any storage unit was battling for his life in a hospital bed. The recuperation process took a long time and was challenging. Barry had to endure months of therapy in addition to multiple surgeries. Basic actions had to be relearned by the same hands that had previously studied old artifacts with great care. His legs, which carried him through innumerable auctions, needed to learn how to walk painlessly. The forced silence must have been extremely difficult for someone who had led such an exciting and energetic life, but Barry's spirit, the same character that won him the affection of Storage Wars fans, saw him through. Like he used to do with storage lockers, he approached his recuperation with interest and patience. He approached mending as an adventure, taking each day as it came, rather than hurrying through it or being angry when things didn't go as planned. Fans were ecstatic to see Barry when he finally started appearing in public once more. His smile was still warm and his humor was still there, but his pace had changed. He spoke a bit more seriously and moved a bit more gently. Although the event had altered him, his soul remained unbroken. Hester, Dave. If Storage Wars were a poker table, Dave Hester would be the one to grin and slap his chips down to startle the other players. He was the man you loved to despise from the first episode. Dave thrived on competition and was loud, self-assured, and never scared to outbid someone by a single dollar. Both his signature and a source of frustration for the other bidders were his notorious yoop. He desired the final word, the finest locker, and the biggest profit. However, Dave's narrative took a dramatic change in February 2018. He had a stroke late one night, which left him with speech and coordination issues. He was facing weeks of rehabilitation while laying in a hospital bed rather than in front of a storage unit. It was a moment of humility for a man who thrived on dominance. For a spell, Dave was absent from the show. His own health was the new battle facing the guy who had once battled valiantly over dusty crates. He gradually regained his vigor and went back to the world of auctions. Fans were aware of the shift, even though storage battles was no longer his primary focus. He appeared more at ease, less engaged in never-ending conflict, and more intent on having fun. People respected the man who battled his way back from a potentially fatal situation, even if they didn't enjoy his antics. It demonstrated that sometimes the loudest voice must become silent before it can be heard again. Calvin Ivy. Storage battles weren't something Ivy Calvin walked into. As if he owned the place, he strode in. Ivy, a mixed martial artist and former arena football player, exuded a confidence that caused others to move aside as he entered. He was known as the King of Palmdale and was able to quickly identify a valuable locker. Running a tight ship was more important to Ivy than simply generating money in the storage game. Every item had a place in his resale shop, which he proudly operated out of Grandma's attic. He was the type of purchaser who could find a hidden treasure beneath a stack of dirty blankets and still find time to crack jokes with his rivals. Fans began to notice, however, that he was becoming less frequent. His competitive edge and loud chuckle were still there, although they were less frequent. Ivy was concentrating on his health and spending more time with his family away from the cameras. In subsequent appearances, his sons frequently accompanied him, transforming the auctions from stressful competitions into family vacations. Ivy demonstrated that sometimes the greatest triumphs take place behind closed doors by resigning without a fanfare. Daryl Sheets. Daryl Sheets was the crazy elder cousin who would wager his last penny only for the excitement of winning, if Barry Weiss was the cool uncle. Daryl lived true to his moniker as the gambler, ever aiming for the big score. If he believed a locker may conceal something amazing, he had no problem throwing a lot of money at it. He frequently appeared with his son, Brandon, who was learning how to take measured risks and sometimes why he shouldn't. This was more than just business for Daryl. He wanted to leave his son with a legacy he could be proud of. Early in the new millennium, however, everything changed. Daryl experienced an abrupt discomfort in his chest after a typical day. It worsened when he initially disregarded it. Before long, he was experiencing a severe heart attack. The health scare wasn't the only one. It was a matter of life or death. It was a necessity, not a choice, for the adrenaline-loving man to calm down. There was an obvious void in the show because of his absence. Fans missed Brandi and Jarrod Schultz, his enormous victories, his bigger losses, and his fearless demeanor. Because they were so fun to watch, they were like the couple next door who somehow managed to get invited to every party. Viewers could see they were complete opposites from the first episode. Jarrod's let's just wing it attitude and Brandi's calm, collected demeanor. With laser-like focus, she would stand there looking through a storage container, attempting to determine whether the stack of boxes was worth the risk. The excitement of placing a bid would be enough to make him want to do so. They were amusing because of that push and pull. As Jarrod pursued anything dubious, you could almost feel Brandi rolling her eyes, and when she was proven correct, you could see Jarrod smile. They were able to balance one another. He added excitement. She was cautious. They made choices together that occasionally turned out well and other times not so well. They occasionally operated their own thrift store on the television, making money off of their finds. However, beneath the giggling and arguing, things were shifting. Their relationship was having difficulties away from the cameras. By 2020, the information was surreptitiously leaked. They were no longer together. There was no spectacular outburst on television. No verbal sparring in public. It simply occurred. Brandi later alluded to how difficult the relationship had been. Although she withheld some information, it was evident that it had been difficult and traumatic. Following the breakup, Brandi turned her attention from the rigorous filming schedule to her kids. For his part, Jarrod lost the limelight as well. The show felt strange without their back-and-forth banter. Fans missed them as a team as much as individuals. They served as evidence that treasure hunts aren't just about finding antiques and trinkets. Even if a relationship doesn't continue forever, Rene and Casey's connection might sometimes be the true value. Rene and Casey brought a completely different energy to Storage Wars. He had a keen eye for valuables, and Rene's loud voice could cut through any crowd. In contrast, Casey counterbalanced him with a kind disposition and meticulous attention to detail. They clearly worked well together in both their personal and professional lives, and you could see they weren't just pretending to be partners. The world of reselling was nothing new to Rene. He had spent years searching for treasures and making money from them, having grown up surrounded by it. Casey wasn't merely a passenger. From identifying high-quality products to handling the business side of things, she possessed unique skills. As a team, they were formidable. They also had no problem having a little fun. Although their interactions were light-hearted on film, it was always obvious that they valued one another's intuition. They all joined together to celebrate their tremendous win. They ignored it and went on when a locker proved to be a bore. However, life has a way of changing priorities. Rene's father died of lung cancer in 2023 following a brief fight. When Rene talked about it, people could sense the anguish in his voice. It was a tough time. He conveyed his sincere appreciation for the help he got from friends and viewers. The loss seems to bring a new dimension to the journey of Dan and Laura Dodson, making it less about chasing the next great success and more about creating something enduring. Without Dan Dodson's pulsating chant and his wife Laura's radiant grin, Storage Wars wouldn't feel the same to many fans. They were not there to place a bid. Their purpose was to maintain the auctions, and they accomplished so in a fashionable manner. Long before the show, Dan had been auctioneering. Even a pile of old boxes could seem interesting due to his lightning-fast fire delivery. Laura was by his side, maintaining a positive vibe and a welcoming environment. No matter how heated the bidding became, they worked together to keep the pace steady. However, their world nearly collapsed in February 2014. Dan woke up one morning with a strange feeling. He had hazy eyesight and fell apart in a matter of minutes. Laura didn't think twice. She took him right away to the hospital. Physicians quickly identified a brain aneurysm as the culprit. It was a dire scenario. Dan might not have made it through without emergency surgery. The recovery was even more difficult than the operation itself. He recovered his strength over the course of several months, with Laura's help at every turn. Even though he walked a little more slowly than previously, fans were relieved when he eventually made his way back to the auction block. For them, the scare was a turning point. Although they were aware of how fast things may change, they still had a deep affection for the world of auctions. They seemed to laugh a little louder and grin a little warmer after learning that Padian, Mary. The other bidders weren't like Mary Padian. Mary appeared to view every auction as a small adventure, but many of her rivals approached the storage lockers with a keen calculator in their minds, calculating profit margins and resale value. A dusty box was more than simply a dusty box to her. It could be a lost chapter in history or a potential gem that is just waiting for a new beginning. Her inventiveness immediately distinguished her when she made her debut on the Texas spin-off, Storage Wars, Texas. Mary had previously served as the editor of Architectural Digest's assistant, giving her experience in both design and journalism. She developed an eye for distinctive objects and the creativity to envision what they may become as a result of that experience. She was frequently seen on the show searching into lockers, removing items that most people would pass by, such as an old trunk or a worn-out chair, and immediately imagining how to turn them into something lovely. She had a cheerful, eccentric, and affectionate manner. Others occasionally quarreled over bids, but Mary took a more cordial and cooperative stance. She forged close bonds with other cast members, occasionally joining forces to attack a locker. Her excitement was infectious, and viewers like seeing her get truly enthused about a treasure, no matter how small. Mary had that same charm with her when she switched from the Texas version to the original storage battles located in California. She didn't merely acquire and sell, instead, she reused, rethought, and created unique objects that combined functionality and creativity. Because of her talent for transforming what was considered trash into jewels, fans dubbed her the Junkster. However, Mary started to show up less and less over time. She turned her attention to managing her internet business, which allowed her to sell her repurposed goods to clients who were as passionate about imaginative upcycling as she was. In addition, she began traveling, taking on more personal projects, and looking for fresh chances apart from the demanding filming schedule. Fans continue to connect with Mary's spirit even though she is no longer a regular on the show. She demonstrated that Storage Wars could be about passion, creativity, and discovering beauty in the most unlikely places in addition to being about making money. Wares, Emily. Despite joining Storage Wars later than others, Emily Wares had impressive credentials. She began her career as an auctioneer in Iowa at the age of 17, and by the time she made an appearance in season 10, she had already won numerous awards. She received training from her father, who worked in the auction industry as well, and soon gained recognition for her confident stage presence and lightning-fast chant. She introduced something fresh to the show. She didn't place a bid. She was present to conduct the auctions with professionalism and accuracy. Even the more seasoned cast members were surprised by Emily's professional and clean manner and her quickness on the mic. She broke norms in a business that is frequently dominated by older men by being one of the youngest professional auctioneers to ever appear on the show at the age of 27. Emily stood out in the business since she had participated in and won other auctioneering events outside of Storage Wars. She kept things moving on the show, but she also didn't hesitate to joke around with the bidders, frequently responding to their banter with a swift response of her own. Her skill and charisma were well received by fans, and she gained popularity fast. Although Emily's tenure on Storage Wars was brief, just 1 or 2 seasons, there was no controversy around her departure. She chose to concentrate on her personal life instead. In addition to starting a family and marrying her longtime husband, she also pursued her passion of singing. She started releasing her songs online and performing at local events, demonstrating that her abilities went well beyond the auction block. Crossley, Kenny. Even at a packed auction, Kenny Crossley was the kind of guy you couldn't help but notice. He could make even a bad locker into a humorous moment with his easygoing charm, thick southern drawl, and sharp wit. Kenny was there to enjoy the ride, meet friends, and have a wonderful time, not just to purchase storage units. Before joining the Storage Wars group, Kenny, who was originally from New Orleans, had a colorful past. He seemed to have a wealth of stories to tell because he had worked in police enforcement, owned his own company, and even tried his hand at a few odd jobs. His connection with Barry Weiss, one of the most quirky and adored stars of the show, led him into the world of storage auctions. When Kenny initially showed up, she accompanied Barry on his crazy shopping excursions. His sense of humor and sincere, grounded nature won over fans right once. Kenny remained on the show after Barry left, making a name for himself among the regulars. He bid in a nonchalant manner. He was not the type to argue passionately over a locker. Rather, he chose his locations, occasionally targeting smaller troops that others might have missed. His fun demeanor and talent for identifying odd and eccentric objects go hand in hand. Kenny gained notoriety over the years for his catchy one-liners and capacity to make even the most heated bidding scenarios humorous. Whether they were other cast members or spectators at home, he had a way of making everyone laugh. Kenny eventually started to show up less frequently. It had nothing to do with drama or animosity. He just shifted his focus to other endeavors, such as opening a donut store and creating his own apparel line. But his absence was hardly unheard of. Online, fans often ask him where he is and if he would return.